Hi, this lesson is on statistical vocabulary. So at the end of this lesson, where you should be able to write a statistical question, identify what statistical variables are, also know the difference between population and sample statistics, as well as the difference between a parameter and a statistic. So important terms in statistics give us a foundation for this unit. So we want to all be on the same page with those. All right. So when we get data, we want to be able to ask ourselves a few questions when we're analyzing it. So this says, the histogram below shows the price of prom tickets at various high schools in the area. What questions could be answered by this data, and who might be interested in this data? Well, in terms of questions, we might want to know a few things. You might say, well, what's the average price? What do they usually cost? I might also say, how much do I need to save for prom? Or how many schools have tickets between 40 and 50 bucks? Also, who might be interested in this? Well, probably people who organize prom, parents and students who have to pay for the prom tickets. That's going to be important information for them to know. Okay, consider the two questions below. First is, in what month is your birthday? The second says, what month has the most birthdays of students at Cass? And then what's the difference between these two questions? The first one, if somebody were to just ask me what my birthday is, there's always going to be a single answer, and it's going to be fixed, and that's August for me. What month has the most birthdays of students at Cass? That's going to be a variety of answers, and you would need to collect data to find that. So you could see up here, right? When we say what is a statistical question, that's really going to be an important thing. That's our next part right here. A question that requires collecting data with variability to answer that question. And so that's how we're looking at this second one right here is I need to collect some data. In this first one, that first question, I would not need to do that. So that's not a statistical question. Okay, so what does this mean? The answer is not a single fixed value. In other words, there's a range of different responses rather than a simple fact. So some statistical questions that I came up with or I wrote down here are, what is the average time spent on homework for 11th graders? That might be a statistical question because you'd have to come up with a number of students that you'd have to ask that question and collect some data. How many hours of sleep do high schoolers get? Again, you need to do a survey and find out how many people have a variety of different answers. I'm sure they're 8 hours, 12 hours, 2 hours. How tall are the dogs that live on this street? Again, there would be a variety to those answers. Another side of that is the non-statistical questions, which might have a numerical answer, like how old are you? If I were to ask you that, you would have a specific number that would come out. What is the capital of Montana, right? A fixed answer, a simple fact. How many hours of sleep did I get last night? So that's a fixed number for just that. So that is why those are not statistical questions. Again, even if they have a numerical answer. Which is the most popular visual art form? Photography, painting, sculpting, or drawing? That you'd still need to collect data on. That's still a statistical question. Something like how many lithographs were created by the artist M.C. Escher? Not a statistical question because that's a fixed number. Okay, anyways. So let's talk about data a little bit. You may have heard of quantitative data and qualitative data. For us, we are going to be looking at types of data that we're going to collect are going to be quantitative and categorical. So what's the difference between those? A quantitative data consists of numbers that represent counts or measurements. An example of that would be like prices of cars at a dealership. They are going to vary, right? But those consist of numbers. Categorical data consists of groups that can be separated into different categories. So like zodiac signs of students in the class. So maybe I'm a Leo, maybe we go around and ask everybody what, and that is different categories that they're in, but it's not a number. Okay. All right, take a look at this right here. We're going to just kind of examine if we understand what a statistical variable is, and then determine if it's quantitative or categorical. So how long are the songs at a Metallica concert? Well, what's varying there? Well, it's the length of the song. That's your variable, right? How long the song is. So that's the data that you would want to collect, is to find out how long each song is. So that then, because it's a number, is a quantitative data. All right, what is your favorite Olympic sport? Your variable then would be the Olympic sport. What that sport is not going to be a number, it's going to be a category. What is the most common jersey number? And that is a number, but it's actually just a category. Even though it's a number, it's just like fitting in a specific category. So kind of confusing there. But how many apps do teenagers have on their phone? Your variable here would be the number of apps, and you would collect data on that. Okay. What breed of dog is most likely to be adopted? So your variable would be the breed of dog, and that is a category. So I hope that makes some sense. Okay. So next we want to talk about how are you getting your data. There are really a couple of different ways to get data. There's population data and sample data. So population data is the set of all members, so everybody of a group that you want to know about. A sample is a subset, or also known as a smaller group of that population that's being studied. So this is important. It's often difficult to do an entire population and get information on an entire population. So a lot of times samples are done. So a polling organization randomly chooses eligible voters in the state of Illinois to ask who they would vote for in an upcoming election for governor to determine who will win the election. What are the sample and the population in this scenario? Okay, well, the population would be, if you were polling, population would be all voters. So let's write that. All voters in Illinois. Okay. The sample would be the randomly, I did not spell random correctly, There we go. Randomly chosen voters. So they're going to poll a certain subset of that. That would be your sample. Okay. Try another one. A city worker collects 5 vials of water from each of 10 randomly selected locations all over the city to test the levels of bacteria in the city water supply. Okay, so the population then would be the whole city. Okay. And then this one, the sample would be 10 randomly selected locations. Hopefully the difference between population and sample makes sense. Okay, so this is important because it ties in with parameters and statistics. So a parameter is a number that describes a population. So let me write that in here, population. Just do a different color here, population. And a statistic is a number that describes a sample. So it's kind of nice because these sort of line up. P parameter, P population, S statistic, S sample. So it's a little easier to remember that, which one's which. Okay, so let's make sure that we understand what this is. So determine if the number described is a parameter or a statistic. So a high school has 3 lunch periods. In the randomly selected lunch period, 24% of students brought lunch from home. Okay, so there's a couple of things here that are important. This is a randomly selected lunch period. Also, there's 24% of those randomly selected. So this is a sample. Okay. At the end of its first year of business, a movie theater collected data on how well its concession stand operated that year. The theater used its total yearly concession sales and number of tickets sold to calculate the mean amount spent at concessions by a moviegoer, and that was $8.14. So you'll notice here that they use their total yearly concessions sales and tickets sold, and then they went from there. So this is a parameter because they use their entire yearly concession sales and tickets. All right. The median age of a car in 20 randomly selected spaces in the school parking lot is 7 years. So this, again, the randomly selected spaces, that's a statistic. Okay. I don't know what's going on there, but okay. In general, it is really difficult to collect parameter data since it is difficult to collect data from all parts of the population. So oftentimes when you see data, it's probably a statistic from a sample, right? Which I guess is a little bit redundant, but you understand. Okay, go ahead and do the assignment on this. I hope this lesson has made some sense. Good luck.